What's growing on, gardeners? This has been the coldest winter that I have ever experienced here on the southeastern coast of North Carolina, but that doesn't mean we can't grow an incredible winter garden. On today's video, I'm going to share with you 6 leafy greens that love cold weather. Frost and freeze are no match for these plants.
If you're new to the channel, please subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and check out my Amazon store and Spreadshop links in the video description for everything I use in my garden and awesome custom apparel and gear.
We are really having a tough winter here. By the time the second week of January ends, we will have had more nights in the 20s than we typically get in an entire winter. That's what makes these veggies so great. They love the cold, and everything is performing well. But that being said, all veggies are more freeze tolerant than they are frost tolerant. And by that I mean if you prevent frost formation on the foliage, they will be able to take much colder temperatures for a longer period of time. The frost really does the bulk of the damage. So if you construct a simple hoop house like this, or find a way to put a piece of agricultural fabric above them to prevent frost formation, it will do a lot to keep your plants healthy and looking great. I will link to a video both above and down in the video description that will show you how to build one of these for only about $40 and 30 minutes of your time. Now I will remove this cover and I'll show you some of the glorious plants that are underneath. Veggie number 1 needs little introduction and will come as a surprise to very few, and that is kale. When I was growing up in the 90s, hardly anybody even knew what kale was. But now if you go to a grocery store, you can't walk down the produce aisle without seeing 3 different types of kale, at least, and for good reason. Kale has incredible diversity. Whether you like baby kale fresh in a salad, or you like big mature kale leaves chopped up in soups or stews, or you like to fry them in olive oil, or whatever your preference may be, there is a ton of stuff that you can do with kale. And what makes kale so special is its unique cold tolerance. Kale is one of the most cold hardy of the brassicas. It can take temperatures down to 10 degrees Fahrenheit, sometimes even lower, especially if you cover them. It was a very cold night last night. We got down to 22 degrees Fahrenheit, and all of this kale was completely unprotected. This is all red Russian kale that actually grew as volunteer seedlings from plants that reseeded themselves. And you'll see right now they look like they are drooping. This is sort of how they protect themselves during cold. And after it warms back up, they will start to fluff back out again, and they will begin to look normal. Look, it looks like this kale plant right here has already covered. This is standing back up and looking totally normal. This stuff is so tough it has found a place for itself all over my garden. Look, there is a volunteer plant that is literally growing inside the crack in the weed barrier right there. On the other side of my garden fence right here, I have another kale plant that is growing in the crack of the weed barrier, and underneath that persimmon tree over there, for some reason, kale has established itself as its own ground cover. This kale plant you see right here is quite mature, and as you can see, I have been eating off of it for quite a while. This is a variety called Red Russian, and it is probably the most cold hardy of all the popular varieties of kale, but it is not necessarily my favorite. I like the dwarf kale right here. These baby seedlings that just went through 22 degrees unprotected are trucking along just fine, and so is this variety right here called Lacinato, which is quite popular. These kale seedlings were just put in a few weeks ago, and I was a little bit concerned. Would the hard freeze of last night do any damage? And of course, the answer is no. Eventually, those dwarf curly kale plants are going to look something like this when they are more mature. This is probably my favorite variety of kale. Despite kale's popularity, it is far from the most cold hardy thing in your garden. In fact, this member of the brassica family is even more cold hardy than kale. That is leafy green number 2, collard greens. Collard greens are hardy down to 0 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit once established. I was born and raised in New Jersey, and I spent the first 31 years of my life living in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, and collard greens just aren't all that popular in the Northeast, and we really need to change that because they are truly special plants. They are just as good, if not better, in soups and stews and braises than kale. That row of collard greens that you just saw a close-up of is about 2 months old. But this row right here, well, these 2 rows right here, are actually about a month behind them. So they are considerably smaller, but they are still weathering through the cold just fine and totally unbothered. They've gone through 2 nights at 19 degrees and many, many nights in the 20s, with probably about a dozen more nights in the 20s coming within the next 2 weeks. And they are completely unbothered by all of this cold. So if you were looking for a leafy green that's just as easy to grow as kale and even more cold hardy, but you want something with a little bit more body and substance, collard greens is definitely your go-to. Leafy green number 3 is something new to my garden this year, but I promise you it will not be the last time I grow it, and that is bok choy. This bok choy may be the most beautiful thing that I'm growing in my entire winter garden. I am just blown away by how incredible this looks and by how well this has weathered our very, very cold winter thus far. I am legitimately stunned with how beautiful these plants are. Can you believe that these went through 2 19-degree nights, a 22-degree night, a 24-degree night, many, many, many other nights in the mid to upper 20s. It has been a really bad winter for us this year, and I just can't believe how well they are doing. They have done better than almost any green in my garden, which is crazy because these don't have quite the reputation for cold hardiness that something like kale or collards do, yet it's just keeping pace with all of them, if not outperforming them. Bok choy only has a reputation for being moderately cold hardy. Most of the resources that I've found state that bok choy is hardy to about 25 degrees Fahrenheit, but once you get to around 20 degrees Fahrenheit, they will start taking severe damage and could die. And that very well may be the case if the plants are completely unprotected, but underneath this hoop house, 2 nights at 19 degrees and a night at 22 degrees did absolutely nothing to it. There isn't even any curling or bronzing. There's no effect at all. It's just incredible. And the other really cool thing about this bok choy is it seems to be completely impervious to insect pests. If you look around at my kale and my collards and my cabbage, every now and again, some of the plants have little holes in the leaves from worms and other things that come to life when we get a few warm days in a row. But nothing is bothering the bok choy. The insects could not care less about them. So for that reason, this is proving to be currently the lowest maintenance leafy green in my entire garden, and that really says a lot. So if you've never grown anything like bok choy and you have no experience with it, or you are experienced with growing lots of stuff and you just want something new and interesting rather than the same old brassicas, consider growing bok choy. It is also a member of the brassica family, so it has a lot of the same traits, but for whatever reason, it seems to be just as cold hardy, and it doesn't have nearly the issue with pests. Leafy green number 4 is something I discovered about 3 or 4 years ago, and after I discovered them, all I could think of was, baby, where have you been all my life? And that is mustard greens. Now, I know a lot of you in the South are laughing when I say, ooh, mustard greens, but again, growing up in the Northeast, these are something that are just not that popular up there. I'm sure some people know about them, but the masses do not. This is another member of the brassica family, so it's similar to kale and collards, but it's quite different in taste because where kale and collards are kind of sweet and earthy, mustard greens are spicy and bitter, and for that reason, they are absolutely fantastic in soups, stews, stir fries, and braises. These are so jam-packed full of flavor, it is ridiculous. Mustard greens are both gorgeous and vigorous. Now, everything in this shot right here was planted at the same time, and the mustard greens are towering over the Brussels sprouts and collards, despite the fact I have already harvested off of them many times, whereas I haven't harvested off the collards and the Brussels sprouts at all. They just grow like weeds, and they are, like I said, incredibly beautiful. Look at that ruffled pattern. Now, because they are so bitter, they are not something that you would probably ever want to eat raw. You definitely want to cook them, but I'm telling you right now, if you like cooked and stewed greens, man, are these things just incredible. I think the cold hardiness of mustard greens is somewhere in the 15 to 20 degree Fahrenheit range. Now, back in early December, we got back-to-back nights at 19 degrees, and the mustard greens that you saw right here, I forgot to cover them, and they were still babies, and they got bleached by the cold. But look, in that little bit of time, less than a month's time, they have completely grown back from that cold damage, and they look incredible. So they have the ability to grow out of any cold damage they have. So I know that they can take upper teens unprotected. They may get a little bit burnt, but they can still grow back and recover. So if you cover them, they may be able to take deep below the teens. I don't know. These things are really super duper cold hardy. And I'm also guessing because of how bitter they are, they have a built-in resistance to insects, because nothing ever bothers my mustard greens. They have no worm damage at all, unlike some of my kale and my cabbage and my collards. Leafy green number 5 that absolutely loves cold temperatures are your cold hardy red leaf lettuces. And no, that's not a cold hardy red, that's still a cold hardy green. Your red leaf lettuces are still predominantly green. However, one thing I do need to tell you is when it comes to growing lettuce in winter, you do have to be very selective about the varieties that you grow, because not all your lettuces are that cold hardy. So I want to specifically hone in on 4 different types of varieties that I have found to be hardy well into the teens. My favorite cold hardy red leaf lettuce is a variety called New Red Fire, and I am growing it underneath this open hoop house right here. It only has a cover over the top to help keep the hard frost off of it, so it still lets in all the cold air. As long as you prevent that frost formation, it's going to do very well. Now, I grew this New Red Fire variety in this exact location last winter, and we got all the way down to 15 degrees Fahrenheit, and it did no damage at all. And we are seeing much of the same this year. 19 degrees, 19 degrees, 22 degrees. It did absolutely nothing to any of this New Red Fire. It all looks great. And if it ever does get any kind of cold damage, the plants, they grow so quickly that they can just grow themselves out of the damage. So for that reason, this variety takes my number 1 spot on my favorite cold hardy red leaf lettuce, which are still predominantly green. 2 more cold hardy red leaf lettuces that I love growing are Red Sails and Marvel of 4 Seasons. Red Sails is a smaller dark red leaf lettuce that is incredibly cold hardy. Marvel of 4 Seasons makes pretty decent sized heads of lettuce for a winter lettuce. In fact, this head right here took back-to-back 19-degree nights completely unprotected, and I just harvested and ate it the other night for dinner. So if you want a winter lettuce that can actually form pretty large heads, Marvel of 4 Seasons is a great one to look into. And on the other side of this open hoop house right here, I am growing a French heirloom red romaine lettuce that is very cold hardy. Now, over the years, I've struggled to pronounce the name of this variety correctly because it is a French word, and I'm from Jersey, I don't talk so good. So thankfully, some of the commenters recently have spelled out phonetically how to pronounce the variety correctly in the comments. So here it goes.
Rouge d'hiver.
Nailed it. And here you can see that variety of lettuce growing. It is coming up slowly because the days are so short right now and the temperatures are so cold that it is struggling to take hold, but as you can see, everything is alive and thriving. So as soon as things start to warm up in Feb and the days get a little bit longer, you better believe this is going to take off like a rocket. And leafy green number 6 that loves cold weather is one that I haven't planted yet, but I will very shortly, and that is spinach. Spinach can be incredibly cold hardy. However, you do need to know something before you just go out and start planting spinach. There are 2 different types of spinach. There are your winter hardy spinaches, and there are your bolt resistant spinaches. Your bolt resistant spinaches are what you plant in the spring and then you harvest in late spring, early summer, because spinach on its own is very prone to bolting. After a few warm days, it can send up the seed tops and get bitter and go to seed on you. So gardeners and breeders over the years have developed heat-resistant varieties of spinach that will do that more slowly, so you'll be able to drag out the harvests a little bit more effectively in the spring and summertime. The issue is a lot of those varieties are not all that cold tolerant. So if you just blindly go grab a variety of spinach off a seed stand and you plant it and you get the wrong type, it may not be all that cold hardy and it may wind up taking damage in the low 20s or something like that. If you get yourself a winter hardy variety of spinach, winter hardy varieties can take cold down to about 15 degrees or so uncovered, and even colder if you do cover them like I am doing with all of my brassicas. So when you do that, most climates can easily grow spinach all throughout the winter. Now, if you live in a place that has very cold winters and you find that the leaves of your spinach plants are damaged beyond the point where you can eat them after some cold nights, that doesn't necessarily mean that the plants themselves are dead. The actual center spear and the roots of the plants could still be alive. So it is not unusual for a spinach plant to die back in the wintertime after severe cold, but then once it warms back up again in late winter and early spring, it re-sprouts from the roots or the center portion that is actually still alive, giving you a huge jump start on the season. So just because your spinach plants take a lot of damage in the winter, don't give up on them. They may come back again for you in the spring. And that right there are 6 leafy greens that love cold weather. Just because you live in a place that gets a lot of frost and freeze doesn't mean you can't grow an amazing winter garden. Here where I live on the southeastern coast of North Carolina, Zone 8B, we get 30 to 40 frost and freeze events on an average year. And this year, it looks like we're going to be way above average and get a lot more than that. And still, I am growing strong. You can grow a lot of these things all the way down to Zone 6, especially when you put a cover on them like I'm doing right here with a little cheap PVC hoop house and an agricultural fabric to keep those hard frosts from forming on the vegetation. So everybody, I sure hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and please ring that notification bell so you're notified when I release more videos like these. If you're curious about any of the things that I use in real life in my garden, please expand the video description and click on the Amazon storefront link. You'll see everything I use in real life in my garden. I will place direct links to some of the seed varieties that I specifically mentioned in this video for your convenience if you are interested in growing any of the exact things that I'm growing in my garden. And while you're down there, please check out my spread shop for custom merch if you want to support the channel. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see all of you again on the next video.
What, Dale? What are you...
What are you trying to say, buddy? Oh, where's he going? Where's he going? What? Oh, he wants to go for a walk? Oh, boy. Oh, wait a second. What's all this stuff here? Oh, he can't even get to his walk button. Who put that junk there? Oh, boy. Oh, we gotta clean this place up. Dale's gotta go for his walk. I can't even see him. He's spinning around in circles. He's spinning around.